Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me to speak. Gee, there's so much we could talk about in the education arena these days. It's quite an interesting time. And actually, I have a great outline of remarks that I'm delivering, and none of them relate to the state budget, which is fascinating because that, of course, is the cliffhanger we're all waiting for right now. Well, again, I'm delighted to be here. I want to start by acknowledging some of my colleagues who are here. President Laurie Bernotsky from Westchester University, President Charles Patterson from Shippensburg, President Daniel Wuba, and Dr. Tom Seeger from IUP. Thank you all for joining us and participating today. We're all happy to be here. Well, first of all, I just want to take a moment. Those of you who are aware of my history know that I was the president of Westchester University. And June of 2024, I happily retired. And I was proud of my body of work and ready to go off into the sunset. And we have a place down in Ocean City. I was going to spend a lot of time at the beach. I joined a country club. I was going to play golf. And just when I thought I was out, they dragged me back in. So, but I'm delighted to be back. I do feel I was ready to leave the presidency, but as I was asked to become the interim chancellor when Dan Greenstein resigned, and I was happy to do that. And I made it clear to Cindy Shapiro, the chair, that I really was not interested in being a candidate for the permanent position. I'd be happy to fill the position while they conducted the search, and then do my best to prepare for the next chancellor's arrival. But then as I got to work, I realized, wow, this is something that I think somebody from the inside might be very, very useful. There's a lot of stuff that we started doing. We started the system redesign under Dan, and even before Dan arrived back around 2017-18. And we've made a lot of progress, but we still have a lot of things that we haven't quite brought to closure. And this really seemed like a good opportunity. If a new chancellor coming in from far away would have to spend the first year or so just sort of getting the lay of the land. And with me coming into this job, all the presidents know me for good or ill. I was one of them, and we all understand what our challenges are. So I'm very excited to be in the job right now. The challenges, I can say, are daunting and wide-ranging, but it's a really very interesting time. And I want to spend a few minutes talking about the various challenges that we see, both in PASHE, in higher education in the Commonwealth, and in the Commonwealth in general, in terms of the things that we need to be able to do to thrive as a Commonwealth. So a number of themes. So we integrated some universities. We combined two groups of 3 into single universities, taking us from 14 to 10, and saw that as an opportunity to achieve some economies of scale, reduced administrative costs, and it remains a work in progress, but as a result of combining the campuses into a single university, it really streamlined the ability for these schools to work with each other, to try to achieve some of the things we're trying to achieve. The climate in Pennsylvania, again, is very unstable right now. All of us in higher education have been dealing with the fact that we've had a demographic decline in the high school graduating population. It actually started well back over a decade ago at this point, and it kind of went down and leveled off and maybe ticked up again, and now we're facing another decline. And we have a lot of higher education institutions in the Commonwealth, and the 18 to 22-year-old population continues to decline. And not only that, a smaller percentage of them are choosing to attend a 2- or 4-year institution of higher learning. So we are absolutely facing a shrinking population of traditional students. And if we just hope that we can survive with that population, we're going to be in for a rude awakening, and perhaps we already are to a great extent. Obviously, many schools are being impacted. by the demographic decline. We have closures, we have mergers, all sorts of things are happening. So one of our key missions, or components of our mission as a state system, is that we're providing education around the entire Commonwealth. Many rural areas students need to have opportunity for higher education. And that has been a challenge, and in particular for us in the western and across the northern parts of the state. That's where we've had the integrations. And what we're trying to do, we're trying to make sure that we're continuing to offer opportunities for higher education to the citizens in those regions. The counties out there, many of them have relatively low populations, again, relatively low numbers of high school graduates. So it's very difficult to sustain universities in that kind of a setting. So with the integrations, and in something else that we just announced recently, a commitment to program sharing, we're really trying to figure out ways that we can continue to provide opportunities to these students in these rural areas to make sure they have access to higher education. Now, the program sharing is an interesting challenge. Everything's an interesting challenge. That's one of the interesting challenges. But a couple of things are interesting about it. One way to do program sharing, because we're talking about geographically distant campuses, is to ramp up our use of online programs. And we certainly have done that. Many schools have done that. But I heard a comment from a parent recently. I jotted it down. Why is my kid living in a dorm and taking online classes? Okay. And that's a fair question, I think. That's certainly not what they envision. And I know, having been a president for a long time, students want to be on a university campus. They want the campus life. And they're inclined to take, I think, some of their classes online, but certainly not come to the campus, live there, and have a completely online education. So if we're going to try to meet this market, we're not going to be able to do it by just ramping up our online programs. So second opportunity, if we're going to do program sharing, where more than one institution, either one campus or university combines with another campus or university, or multiple campuses or universities, we have the opportunity to link them electronically, where we can have sort of a synchronous model where a professor is standing in a classroom on one campus, and we have students there, and we have students in a classroom on another campus who are actually attending that lecture. And that's all well and good, and as a number of people have pointed out to me, as long as the technology works. And technology can be iffy. Matter of fact, a couple weeks ago, I participated in a presentation down in Washington, D.C. At the NACUBO conference. And they had it all rigged up so that people could submit their questions electronically, and I guess that's what we're doing today. Well, guess what? There was a lightning storm 10 minutes before the talk started, and all the electronics broke. So they couldn't take the questions, and the people were supposed to be watching it remotely, and they couldn't watch it remotely. And, you know, so here I am making remarks about the importance of reliable technology in this room full of people where obviously technology had just failed us. Now, a lightning storm, okay, lightning storms happen, but still, if we need to rely on technology, and I'll bet I could get a lot of head shaking in this room if I just took a simple example of, you know, you're participating in something and you're relying on technology and it doesn't work, and you end up with a large group of people either trying to get onto a Zoom or trying to get linked to somebody somewhere else, and it's just not working, and everybody's just sort of sitting around. Well, we are not going to be able to be successful with our program sharing, with synchronous delivery, if that's our problem. And one of the things I always try to keep in the back of my head, our students don't care about our problems. They come with an expectation, and we have to figure out how to deliver on that expectation. So my view right now is, okay, we need to figure out how to do this program sharing, but step one is we need to figure out how we can make sure the technology is reliable so we can actually deliver it. We learned a lot about higher education during the pandemic. If you had asked me in February of 2020 whether an entire industry could pivot 180 degrees and completely change how it operated, suggesting that that might be higher ed, I would have laughed at you. I would have said, no, we deliberate too much. We don't move quickly. Agility is not a word that you use typically when describing universities. Well, you know what? We did. And we did. My theory is that everybody realized that we didn't really have a choice. Here we were. This was happening to us. At that point, there were no vaccines. I can remember the first person on our campus who contracted COVID. I was scared to death that he was going to die. That was the world we were living in at that point. So everybody agreed, faculty included, that we're going to have to figure out how to change and how to do this. And that was very encouraging to me because we did. At Westchester, we took, I guess, 2 weeks and we retooled, we reopened, and everything wasn't perfect, but we moved forward. And the students continued to take their classes and graduate, and life went on. It's interesting to me right now that for some reason, we're not feeling that same sense of urgency around the challenges that we're facing at the moment, although we probably should be. It's not a worldwide pandemic, but we are in a crisis. We have schools that are not able to balance their budgets. We have enrollment declines that are making schools to some extent almost disappear in some cases. And sometimes we sit around tables with people and they just don't seem to, there's this mindset of, oh, we'll figure it out, we'll work it out. But you know, it's not going to work itself out. It's not. We're going to have to actually take action in order to make it work out. So these are interesting times. Again, back to my purpose for coming back, we need to make sure that we have finished the things we've started. We've put a bunch of things in place. We need to finish them. We need to finish strong and move ahead and preserve these opportunities for students to attain higher education. You know, Penn State right now, difficult situation. They're closing 7 campuses. I don't know if you've looked at the enrollments on some of those campuses, but you know, it probably a responsible decision. These are campuses with 300, 400, 500 students on them. How do you run a university campus with those kinds of numbers? It's very challenging, and it's gut-wrenching, I know, for the administration, for the faculty, for the students. Nobody wants to do that, but this is a time for difficult decisions. Now, with that happening, from our perspective, what do we need to do to help fill that gap? We need to be able to step up. You know, one of the campuses that's closing is Penn State Du Bois, and we have several campuses very nearby, and we need to make sure that the students know that the options are there. Many of them may choose to transfer to another Penn State campus, that's fine, but they need to understand what their options are moving forward. So we need to be communicating about that. I want to move on and talk about some of the other challenges, the cost of operation, for example. We've had significant enrollment declines. PASHE, from its peak enrollment of almost 120,000 students, is down to 82,000 students. We have lost almost a third of our enrollment since about 2012 or so, almost a third of our enrollment. You can't have something like that happen and continue to function and expect to be business as usual. Now, several of my colleagues and I started looking into some of the challenges that would be related to enrollment declines and being able to operate in a difficult fiscal climate. as our enrollments declined, we became very concerned that we were pricing ourselves out of the market. The tuition at the PASHE schools was getting too high, that was contributing to our loss of enrollment. And as a result, we have actually had a run of 7 years where we didn't raise tuition, which was great for the students, but certainly a big challenge for operating the campuses. Now, in that time, the legislature and the governor have been very supportive of us. It's been a great help, but they have not been filling the gap dollar for dollar in terms of the losses that we have been incurring. So we started taking a look at some of the characteristics of universities, and some really interesting things jumped off the page at us. One of the first things was, when you look at your array of programs at a university, one of the things that you'll always hear is we need to give the students lots of choice. And people will say that, and other people will just nod. That's kind of a given. Yeah, we have to give the students lots of choice. Well, there's some interesting things that if you dig into the numbers. First of all, if we look at a typical incoming class, first-year class at a college or university, around 40% of the students come in without actually having selected a major. So they don't even know what they want to do. Now, what that says to me is, all right, students are choosing a school because they want to go to that school, not necessarily because they want to major in a particular program at that school. Now, that's not a universal observation. I mean, many students want to be business majors or psychology majors, and most places, the enrollments are robust enough that they can support them. So that it may very well be that, okay, they're not going to pick a school that doesn't have business if they are interested in majoring in business, but you know, they're typically going to find that. But if you look across the full array of programs, it becomes a little trickier. And what we found in PASHE, I took a look at our completion rates over a 4-year period. What we discovered was that 95% of our completers, people completing degrees, are graduating in 50% of our programs. And the remaining 5% are graduating in the other 50%. I'd like to pause at that point just for the drama. I mean, that was stunning to us. Because all those programs that we offer, we have to provide the classes so the students can take them. But you're putting a lot of classes out there, staffed by a lot of faculty, with very few students actually taking the classes. And we are not in a world in which we can continue to do that. We certainly can't. And so, you know, we're taking a look at what are we going to do about that? And of course, we have tenured faculty and you know, lots of challenges in how we operate. But to continue to try to be all things to all people in that kind of a world, we're not going to be able to make it. Now, this is another interesting opportunity for program sharing because we have many of the social science programs are the ones that are low enrolled. So perhaps a strategy for retaining programs like economics or geography or some of these programs that don't have huge numbers of majors but do typically participate in the general education is to try to connect these programs across the campuses and again, share them so that we can aggregate our small number of majors across the campuses and deliver the programs at a lower cost. So again, these are things that we're looking at that are opportunities. But again, the logistics of doing this are very tricky. Moving on to an alternative population that is available to us. Okay, as I said, the 18 to 22-year-old population is declining. But the numbers that we're seeing, both in terms of the PASHE schools and the Commonwealth in general, the number of people who have some college credit but no degree is huge. For the PASHE schools, it's over 200,000 people who we're aware of. They took some classes at one or more of our schools. They're still around. They never got a degree. Now, I got a note yesterday from the Vice Chancellor that New Jersey was just recognized by an organization called SHIA, which is a National Organization of System Heads. They engaged in a strategy to re-enroll students, and they brought back over 11,000 students, 11,000 and counting. I haven't even seen the latest numbers, but they were just recognized by this national organization for this very creative approach to attracting additional students. Now, the interesting dilemma associated with these students, number one, they're not 18 to 22, so all the tactics that we would use to recruit them and to orient them and so forth are not relevant. They're adults. They're probably working. They maybe have a family. They're not going to be able to come to campus and live in a residence hall and take classes. So they're going to need classes when they're available, probably evenings and weekends. I'm told some of them are interested in coming back and taking classes face-to-face. Others are happy to take the classes online. So that's what we should be doing, right? We should be offering these kinds of programs to these kinds of students. Well, how do we do that? Where do we start? I've been taking a look at the number of programs we have across PASHE right now that are actually available to these students at the moment. Available meaning they're offered at a time that would be convenient. It's almost none. And by the way, how do we recruit them? How do we orient them? You know, these are all really interesting questions for us. Some of them maybe are well along in the path towards their degree, and they may be interested in a program like a liberal studies program or a general studies program, and that would be great. And we think that, well, we have some of those kinds of programs in place, and we think that that might be a pretty straightforward thing for us to be able to do, to offer them some kind of a program like that. But if we look at the challenges that we're hearing from the Commonwealth in terms of the types of jobs that we need to fill, and you've all, I'm sure, heard the statistic that 60% of the jobs out there require a college degree, and only 53% of the Commonwealth population, adult population, has a relevant degree for that. So that's a gap we're trying to fill. And those are specific gaps. Those are areas of business, social work, teaching, mental health counseling, nursing, all these kinds of things. So increasing our number of liberal studies graduates is not going to allow us to attack that problem directly. The liberal studies degree, again, is going to be great preparation for people to be more marketable in the workplace. But if we are looking for people with specific skills, we have to go about this a little differently. And that is a whole nother interesting challenge when we try to figure out how to execute that. So these are the things, these are the opportunities that are out there, these are the challenges that we're trying to address. And I want to spend a few minutes looking at other types of challenges. One in particular, I have a little anecdote to share about AI. Okay, AI is already here, but in higher ed, we to a great extent, we're aware of it, and we seem to be thinking about it and having workshops and so forth. And I was sitting down at the beach the other night with my son and daughter-in-law and my wife. And my wife is a faculty member. She's retiring. She was the director of the Masters in Human Resources program at Westchester University. And she made a very bold statement to my 30-year-old son, who's a data analytics specialist. She said, I don't have to worry about AI in my exams because I give my students hypotheticals. Okay? So my son Jeff said, Mom, give me a hypothetical. So my wife proceeded, just off the top of her head, she said, consider the following scenario from an HR compliance perspective. An employee informs you that they have recently begun to take a prescribed medication for a chronic medical condition. They're having difficulty arriving at work on time. Your organization maintains a zero-tolerance policy for tardiness, and this employee has an established record of repeated tardiness. You intend to take disciplinary action for this pattern. Given your knowledge of their medical situation and the connection to lateness, what potential legal and policy concerns should you identify before proceeding, and how might they affect your course of action? That sounds like a pretty meaty question for a master's degree exam. So my son typed it into ChatGPT, and I won't read you the response, but I watched as my wife's jaw dropped. And it was interesting. I said, "Is that an A answer?" And she said, "Well, yes, and it would have been an A plus if they mentioned FMLA." So my son typed in, "What additional considerations might be taken into account?" And they said, "Well, if there are FMLA considerations, then..." So this was a perfect answer. And there are several interesting implications of this. Number one, how do we make sure we're testing our students for the knowledge they're supposed to have? And I don't know if there are any HR professionals in the room, but I'd be pretty nervous if I were an HR professional when an answer like that can be given from just typing in a question to ChatGPT. But I think the more important question for us is, how should we be educating our HR professionals and everybody else? Because the interesting question is that you do have to be an expert to actually realize that that was a good answer. Because you can type stuff in and you can get garbage back, and if you don't know what you're talking about, then you won't even know it's garbage. We used to have when we started using calculators, one of the examples that was always given was, you use a calculator, you type and you get an answer, and you have to know whether that answer makes sense. For example, if you're trying to calculate a price, I'm an economist, and it gives you a negative number, you should know to go back and say, wait a minute, it can't be a negative number. Something must be wrong. All right, so our challenge, I think, is to make sure that we're educating people to be able to figure this stuff out. And we better hurry up and get on it, because it is here. Young people today are relying on this stuff. And if we don't adjust to this and make sure that we are educating people, not training them, and by the way, this is a pitch for general education, critical thinking, problem solving. These are the critical skills that we have to make sure that our students are leaving with. I will stop with that, and thank you very much for your attention.